Welcome everybody who has joined us, and there are more people joining now, so welcome everybody, and of course welcome our wonderful speakers. We have Regenold, Oliver Hilgers. Please wave. Okay. Oh. We have Thomas Doerge from BSI, and we have Matteo Gubellini from SoftComply, and I'm also from SoftComply. And let's do a very quick round of intros among the speakers. So I will be moderating, so I will give the floor to the speakers for a brief intro. So let's start with Oliver.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Oliver from regenold, heading the digital health and innovation section at regenold. I'm focusing on CE marking, support, DIGA, DIPA, everything that's around medical device software.
Very good. Thank you so much. And you're based in Germany?
In Germany, yeah.
Right. Thomas, can you do a little intro?
I will definitely. Thomas Doerge, I'm the global head of the active implantable medical devices and software as medical devices team at BSI.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions to real life auditor. And Matteo, a short intro from you, please.
Matteo Gubellini, I am the CRO of SoftComply, so I manage anything related to compliance of our tools to the medical device standards and regulation. I have about 17 years of experience in the medtech sector, in R&D mainly, and that's it.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And just before we begin with our topics, I wanted to say a few housekeeping rules. If you have any questions, please put them either in the chat or actually better yet, this Q&A section. And I'm keeping an eye on these questions, and we are trying to do leave 10 minutes towards the end so that we can address the questions. And if we don't, then we'll try get them next time when we do the webinar. But hopefully in the chat that we will have, there will be a lot of the most hot topics at least covered. So let's start from the very beginning. So as probably or hopefully all our attendees know, is that when you want to market a medical device in Europe, you need to comply with medical device regulation. So let's start from here. Let's do a quick maybe recap of what are the most fundamental elements of compliance with the EU MDR. Oliver, maybe you can start with that.
All right. So when we talk about the fundamentals, the first thing that you need is money in the bank. Otherwise, you will not move on. And maybe Thomas will say something about this when you need the 2A certification later. You need the ability to suffer, you need patience. I think these are the first key attributes you need before you really start to go into this software development of medical devices. And then you will need a strategy, because you need to understand, is it just a medical device? Do you want to get a reimbursement, because that will have impact on the technical requirements of your software development? So are you a startup? You might want to start as a non-medical device first in the first phase. So there are a lot of things you have to do before you really go into the software development. And of course, once you're there, you will need to establish a technical documentation and a quality management system for your product. And when I think of startups, you have not that much capacity usually. So then you should focus when you move on. So you should start with a document, because that's the fundamental basis for everything that you will document and how you proceed. Establish kind of a document framework like SoftComply, for example. So you have to think about that in the beginning. And then to move on with things like software lifecycle process, risk management, and usability. I think if you focus on these processes first, then you have a good start, and you can work on the other topics because there are a lot later. But if you have this core, you are ready for the next steps. I think that would be the starting point.
Okay, very good. I think it's a nice, concise way of looking at it. Although, of course, the money and patience is a bit tricky, but I mean, one of the fundamental parts, like you said, technical documentation, eQMS. Maybe we can continue from here with Thomas. Can you describe a little bit of what are the most important elements of an acceptable eQMS for an auditor? What should manufacturers put in place?
I think the requirements, if we are talking about eQMS, I think we are going to cover later on the verification and validation data, right? If it comes to electronic quality management system, and I think that's the interesting part. If we can start to talk about the validation and verification and all the activities behind that and what's required there. Aside of that, I mean, there's no difference in the requirement if you would work on a paper-based system, right? Or you would start with an eQMS system. At the end of the day, if you would look into the law and what's required there, or you think about the ISO 13485. So I think it gets more interesting from an auditor perspective later on if we start to talk about the verification and validation and what's required there from an auditor perspective.
Absolutely, but maybe let's explore a little bit here. We have a lot of companies here using Atlassian tools, so they're using Jira and Confluence, and a lot of companies put their quality management system in place on Confluence Cloud, and a lot of times they wonder, you know, if they should invite the auditor to their Confluence instance, or should they instead export all the technical documentation to PDF? What is the auditor's preferred way of looking at technical documentation?
It's you know, if we and you know, you need to consider as well, that's the quality management system part. If we are talking about the procedures, the manufacturing, anything behind that, and that's the output as well, which is at the end of the day, part of it is the technical documentation. The requirement is clear. We need to, when it comes to the technical documentation, we need to have a set of documents in front of us because we need to document that as well and save it at the end of the day, right? Because that requirement is in place. So there would be still the requirement to prepare a kind of an output, however that output looks like, right? To be sent over to the notified body that we can perform that assessment. We would not tell you just give me the access to your internal technical documentation and I will access the documents via link. So that's not possible.
Okay, good. So that's a good answer. That is the answer that we normally also give, but they always wondering, you know, why can't we just invite the auditor into our instance? It would be so much easier. They could look around, you know. But coming back, sorry, go ahead.
I think if you are in the, let's say, quality management audit, the 13485 audit, that's totally fine. That you will have that the auditor gets access live, you know, on site, and there you can of course use it and show it to him.
That's definitely, and I was trying to make that case as well, right? On the quality management side, if you're on site, of course you can look into the eQMS system then, right? And you get the evidence and find it there. On the other side, it gets even more complex if we are talking about the technical documentation, because then we need to document, and you need to see it from the other side as well. If we get audited, right, by the competent authorities, they want to see that evidence at that point of time. So I wouldn't be allowed to go back to the manufacturer to say, can you provide me with additional links? So therefore we need to save the documentation on our side.
That makes complete sense. Absolutely. And I will continue with you, Thomas. In terms of what Oliver was saying about, you know, a lot of money, you know, patience. Let's talk about the effort that goes into preparing for an audit. I mean, I have to disappoint the audience. There is no one size fits all, so we can't say that, okay, for everybody it will cost that amount of US dollars. Unfortunately, this is not the case. but let's talk about the effort that goes into preparing and the effort of getting ready for and going through an audit as itself. And what are the areas in which you would suggest to manufacturers to spend more time to make a really significant or great submission on their part? Maybe you can elaborate on that, Thomas.
I can definitely do that. So I would recommend to look into the guidance documents, which typically get published by the MDCG guidance. There's tons of information available from Team NB or from the different notified bodies as well, separate documents there. I think sometimes it's the confusion if you go into the MDR, right? You can read the text, but it's more about the interpretation and what is required to satisfy that requirement. So it's more about that. First of all, taking the time to take all the guidance which is out there into consideration. Then the second part is what sometimes gets, creates a bit of confusion is, of course, we are going in to look into the quality management system, right? And that audit will end up with a report. But that assumption that the technical reviewer in the second step, looking at your technical data, knows in this case every little detail of your quality management system at the same time. So if you think about a medical device, and we are talking about testing and final reports and requirements there, for final reports, let's say if you release a product into production, for example, right, we would like to see that specific procedure as well as part of the technical documentation review to be capable and able to understand what was required really. Is the testing appropriate? So this is we get a lot of questions regarding that, and why do you need to see these procedures again? Because they were already part of the QMS assessment on site. So, and the best tip I can really hand over is take your time to prepare the presentation, because what we see at the moment, especially for startup companies or SMEs, is if you invest more time at the beginning to get it right, to have a full documentation in place, that saves you a lot of time if you have to go through the conformity assessment process.
They're really good, really many very good recommendations for manufacturers. You mentioned a lot of guidance documents at the beginning. I mean, these are just for the audience to know. We will send you some links afterwards to different guidance documents, like MDCG guidance documents, which are very, very valuable. You mentioned Team NB or Team Notified Body. Can you please elaborate what it is? Because I don't think many people here know what it is.
That's an association of notified bodies, right? So, and we have the Team NB on one side. There is on the other side the notified body coordination groups, and both groups, they publish as well guidance documents, right, to help to better understand what is required by the regulation. So I would highly recommend to take these guidance documents as well into consideration. Of course, they are at a different level. If you would say, how can you enforce something like this as a notified body, as a regulator, for example, they are at a different level compared to the MDCG guidance documents, which are out there. But it is more about providing a good understanding of the requirements of the MDR, and whatever you can get and helps you to get better understand what is required to prepare your technical documentation, for example. And you can download really good guidance from Team NB there as well with all the details, so that you can better understand what are the minimum requirements if it comes to a certain aspect of the device. Take these documents, please, into consideration.
Yeah, that's a wonderful recommendation, because I think there was also something for AI Act, if I remember correctly, from Team NBA, but we'll get to the AI later. Sorry.
So just to add and do a little bit marketing for Thomas, I think if I remember correctly, Thomas, you have a BSI guidance on how you would like to have the structure of the technical documentation. If that should be mentioned, I think, because going quickly deep into one example, if you have a technical documentation, you have to provide the software documentation. One topic, for example, is the software requirement specification. So there could be different ways where you place it in the technical documentation structure. It could be in the chapter 3, device design stages, where you can say, okay, that's why we put it there, because it's the beginning of our device design stage, and the concept stage where we have user requirements and software requirements. You could also place it in chapter 6, where they have the validation and verification of software. And I think it's always good if you have a notified body, for example, like SBSI, if they have a guidance, you should try to follow the structure, because it makes everything easier, because the auditor knows the structure, makes things easier in the audit, and it will always have positive effects, and you know what to place where. So that's, I think, it's important hint.
Yeah, absolutely. You're completely right. I mean, there is a lot of very good material from BSI to make more marketing for BSI. But Matteo, based on your experience in medical device manufacturing, what have you seen are the most difficult or time-consuming aspects in preparing for a conformity assessment in your experience?
It's just that a lot of companies are late. They scramble at the end, and I remember which of you mentioned it, but start early. And if you need
I think someone said that start as early as you can.
It's always, it's kind of the typical recommendation that everybody gives: start early. And if you are kind of stuck with resources, which most of the time is the case for medium, small companies, start thinking about the product. I mean, you're not going to need probably the CAPA process immediately, but you need to start putting together your technical file, your initial requirement indication for use as soon as possible, because this will have a ripple effect on the design of the device. And instead, if you try to do it at the end, you do all your risk analysis, and then you realize that things are not good enough, or there are high risk, or something that doesn't look good, and you have to make changes to the device at the later stage, which is definitely more painful. This is the part that I've seen that it hurts the most, like doing it way too late. Like if you've never gone through an assessment, you don't know exactly what it means and what the expectations are first, and you don't realize also that it's a process that is not you submitted, it's done. There will be some back and forth for sure. Things will have to be modified, change, or explain at the minimum, new documentation put together, clarification. So it's the timelines that many startups have, is that 3 months and it's on the market. Like, not if you go through a notified body, sorry. So these are the things that I've seen the most, and this is for medium, small companies, startups, and the likes. For larger companies now, it's more about the most relatively recent topics. So where there is some uncertainty, there's not a lot of experience in terms of going through a submission, like AI, or even, although it's not that recent, but there's all the aspect of cybersecurity and post-market surveillance related to cybersecurity is something that you need to consider very early in the design to make sure that your device is upgradable and patchable on the field, and that is in some cases not easy at all. So, these are the aspects that I see more often, that I heard people that, yes, there is technical knowledge in terms of what AI is, but in terms of what to send for submission, what type of documentation put together, in Europe is not as clear, for example, as the FDA. The FDA has released recently a very, very thick guidance documents about AI, which I would suggest to follow anyway, because there's nothing really around there if you prepare that documentation, but that's where you can be caught.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the AI-enabled medical device guidance, I think, from FDA that is really, exactly. Really, really good. Yeah, thanks for that.
It's very demanding as well.
So like we hear most, start as early as you can with putting together the technical documentation and describe your product development. The one thing we also hear a lot from different sources is get in touch with a notified body early on. Also in US, get in touch with FDA early on. Thomas, how much truth is in that? Like, what support can the startups or medical device software developers get from a notified body? When should they contact you? What should they ask? What are you definitely not looking forward to answering? And also, please mention the BSI's structured dialogue and interactive dedicated review pathway, because these are things that I understand they are there to support those medical device developers. So please tell us a little bit about this.
Wonderful. Then let me start with the structured dialogue, right? So we got more details about the structured dialogue in MDCG 2019-6 revision 5. So if you take a look at that document, you can see which topics can be covered in that dialogue before you have a contract in place with the notified body and after you have a contract in place, okay? So, and before you really sign a contract, we can talk about, general requirements. We can talk about the conformity assessment itself. So if there is some uncertainty of the requirements in the MDR, right, in general, that can be covered before you have a contract in place. So, and if you have already a contract in place, then we as a notified body can even go deeper in your technical documentation. We can talk about technical aspects and details there. We can cover clinical aspects as well to a certain degree. So I can just encourage you to read that guidance. And the reason why the Commission decided to say we need to limit the topics before you have a contract in place is to avoid, I don't like that wording, but it's called notified body shopping, to see where can I get the easiest right, if I can call it like this. So, and therefore this process is in place to say, we need to limit before you have a contract, and then we open up, it's up to you as a manufacturer to say, I would like to sign now with a certain notified body, and then you can open up the items which can be discussed. What we have seen, and this is especially if it comes to conformity assessment, we don't have any challenge with capacities whatsoever, really. We are well resourced. There is no limitation on our side. Before I start to talk about that interactive dedicated, maybe a word which relates to that. We do publish on a monthly basis a lead time document, right, which tells you really this is the device category, and you will find the information is going to take us 2 months, whatever it is, 1 month. At the moment, if you would give me the submission now for such a device, this is the time how long it takes that we can really start to perform the conformity assessment. Is one step. That document gets updated on a monthly basis so that the manufacturers have always that information in front of that. That is our commitment, to be as much as transparent as possible. So let me come back to the dedicated interactive process. This is again talking about transparency. So you would get at the beginning of that conformity assessment a full schedule with all the rounds of questions, so every single step throughout the process. Plus, we are going to initiate a kickoff meeting at the beginning of the conformity assessment process. So you get to know the reviewers on the other side. We are not the black box. They can talk to each other. You can, for example, share us information about your device that we can get a general understanding before we really start a conformity assessment. Then we are going to open up, for example, a Teams channel so that you can directly interact with each other. So the reviewer is going to start a review, and in case there's something missing, documents, whatever it is, there's uncertainty on a statement, a justification is missing, the easy bits in the conformity assessment, you can respond in real time if you are capable to. And then all the things which cannot be solved in a short time frame, they will end up in a formal round of questions. So, and we've done already a lot of these reviews, and they're really successful, and we can show that this is a really efficient process to bring products in a really short time frame to the market.
Wonderful, thank you. That was very, very good to know. And I added a few links also from BSI website to the chat so that everybody can afterwards look into the structure of the dedicated review pathway as well. But Oliver, can you maybe add a little bit more on how your clients have used this particular pathway or the dialogue, and how has it supported them?
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think if you have these two, let's say, two pathways, you can go, let's say, the common approach for the timeline, or you can go the dedicated one, which of course is faster. And fast is because of course they allow you way more communication in between. I think Thomas, you mentioned you have this kind of Teams channel that you would like to establish, where you then not like in the old days you have to write an email and then you have to wait and sometimes something popping up, but it's really like a direct communication. I think that which is standard nowadays, and that you use any kind of Slack, Teams, whatever to communicate. And I think the reason for the channel is that you can still store it. I think that BSI will need this record, of course, these discussions you have with the client for their record keeping and for showing it to the joint committees. Then, when to use which one. Of course, it depends on your business strategy. There are so many reasons why you might want to go faster. One reason can be, there's a competitor behind you, and every month you're earlier on the market. It not only gives you more sales, but also might give you really a substantial lead time in entering the market. So then you have to balance the extra costs for this month you save against what you will get from the market. So there's always this kind of trade-off you have to make this decision for. Or you might have other reasons. It could be milestone that the investor is asking for. You're under pressure. You have to do it in this time frame. Could be other topics like reimbursement or something like this, where you have certain deadlines you want to meet. So it's always about how it affects your business and your business strategy. And in the beginning, it always sometimes sounds maybe tough for a company if you hear the costs that are different than to the normal rate. But again, if you have a substantial competitor advantage because of that, I think you will do it because it's worth to do it. So it's really depending on that.
Absolutely. I mean, there is one question here that I think is quite relevant to what we are talking about. Is if there is there is not complete clear understanding of the guideline documents, which there are a lot of different guidelines, of course, as well. How should manufacturers act in these cases? Could they ask advice from the notified bodies, or is it more maybe the types of companies like regenold that they should go to instead?
Yeah, I think.
Please.
Can I make a start, Oliver? Apologies. I think the same foundation and the same rules still apply, right? We cannot consult as notified bodies. So that's the baseline. And then that defines a little bit what your question is about, right? So maybe consultancy company can definitely support there. If it's a simple question about the requirement itself, right, that might be part of a structured dialogue maybe as well. If we are talking about the guidance documents, right, and as far as I know them, there is no major difference in the way they lay out what is required, for example, for a technical documentation, right, if it comes to Annex 2 and Annex 3 of the MDR. So, and what you need to see at the end of the day, you need to satisfy the requirement of the MDR, right? And the guidance is just to help support, provide you a better understanding. I think you should not apply the approach to say, oh, wow, they are different from two different notified bodies, as long as they can help and support you to get a better understanding of the requirement in the MDR. Make use of it.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think the question continues about how can Class 1 manufacturers do things better. So again, I think something that consultancy companies definitely could help you here.
Yeah.
But very good. I think we can move on to something that is providing a lot of confusion around medical device software or SAMD developers in our world. So a lot of companies are using SaaS products for their product development and also for the eQMSs. So then we get to the point where we're talking about software tool validation and SaaS products that are being used that change very, very frequently and have no visibility of change control to the user. Now, what exactly does a notified body auditor expect from the software? The medical device software developer in terms of validation documentation? is going to be the question. But before we get there, I want Matteo to give a very brief, and I stress here very brief because Matteo loves this topic and can go on.
I don't like it. That's why I talk a lot about it.
We can talk for hours about software tool validation. So I want to, just so that everybody is, understands what we're talking about here. Let's just briefly touch upon this requirement of software tool validation, and then I will ask Thomas the question of what does a notified body auditor expect in terms of validation documentation. Matteo, please.
Okay.
You can speak a little bit.
No, I'll try to be concise. Now, nowadays, everybody uses software in their companies, and same for medical device. There are no companies that have everything on paper. They do schematics on paper. They even software, of course, you can't do it on paper. So you're using software tools of any type, software packaging, so laptops, operating systems, specific applications, and so forth. And of course, needless to say, you expect them to do what they're supposed to do, what it says on the tin, what the manual says. And of course, even more, if this has somehow an impact on the business of the company, and in particular, if it has an impact on how you manage your quality system and on the device itself. So when it gets to a certain point, because not everything is critical, when it gets to a certain point where we're talking about software that manages documents, electronic signature, or even more, if it has somehow an impact on the product in terms of how it is developed, how is it manufactured, how it is supported, or how it is monitored, then you need to have a formal process to validate it, which means to prove with data, with objective evidence that is do what it is supposed to do consistently and reliably. So this is a nutshell is what the validation of software tool means. So provide evidence that this is the case. The extent of this validation, exactly how to do it, there is guidance, especially the FDA is more on the kind of the manufacturing process. They are very focused on that. In Europe, there is little bit less guidance. There is pharma industry, they are very into that as well. They are really leading the effort in terms of validation of processes in general. But exactly how you do it, it's pretty much risk-based. There is very little that is black and white other than 416 in 1345 that says, yes, if you manage software if you have software managing the quality system, you need to validate it. But in terms of the extent, it is a risk-based approach. The FDA has some guidance that gives you an idea of what is more critical and less critical for them. But otherwise, it is up to the company to justify the level of effort. And it is important to note, because some companies still make confusion, like it is software tools that are not part of the device. They're not sub-components. They're not libraries that you use in your software to build your IDE to build your software as part of the software. These are tools that don't get into the device. If it gets into the device, then you get into design controls, and that's it. It's part of the device. But these are tools that are used to support the development or the quality
like
system
Confluence.
without Confluence, Jira, like hundreds of them, like IDEs, debuggers, vulnerability scanners, you name them.
Yep. So let's go. Let's now look into, let's say, Confluence Cloud changes all the time. Validation documentation, Thomas, what do you expect the manufacturer to put together and show the evidence that it actually works as expected?
Yeah, definitely. I think Matteo summarized it already very well, I hate to say, right? There's not much room for me, but I'm happy to add on that. So we can always point back to the standards, right? And Matteo mentioned as well 13485, for example, right? And then we need to think about 4.1.6 6, which is validation, right? That you are required to have the procedures in place, that the validation has been performed. And to Matteo's point, it needs to be risk-based, right? Because it's not that detailed that it says you have to do it this way, right? So, and that's up to the manufacturer to decide how big is the risk of that tool, right? To the overall process there. And you can think about 7.5.6 as well, which is the validation of processes for production. It depends a little bit on the tool, right? And as Matteo said, as long as it is not part of the final medical device, right? Then we have different mechanisms which come into play there. But I think if you start on a risk-based approach, that's the best what you can do. And then you need to find the appropriate validation tool. I mean, there's nothing holding you up to utilize the 62304, right? And apply some principles there as well if you want to, right? But that's your call as a manufacturer to say that's enough and that's the risk to my medical product in the big context.
Yeah, Oliver, you are muted, but I think you wanted to elaborate a little bit in scoping and ideally also the frequency of validation, because this is another question that if those tools are changing constantly, like every day, how frequently should the manufacturer then run another validation? So Oliver, please.
Yeah, maybe just to add on Thomas, Matteo, I think it's very important to understand there's no standard like a harmonized standard like the 60304 for software lifecycle process for this validation. There are standards available. The typical ones you would think of is GAM5, which is coming from the pharma field. And there's another one I can add it here in the chat. This is really for medical devices. It's the 80,000. I also get the 80,002-2, which is the validation of software for medical device quality management systems. And even for example, what we do in practice is that we not even use one of them. We have created an SOP that is kind of a hybrid for it, because there are things in the GAM5 I like, for example, to categorize tools. Are they already established? Are they well known? Do you know that they work because they are like Microsoft tools? You know they are robust. It's not a totally different level than saying I have developed my own tool. So this categorizing is a very good approach for validation effort. And then in the next step is then really to go into this other standard which I mentioned, to have this kind of risk-based approach. Means you make a risk management and you really check how do I need it, what do I need it for, and also to see what kind of mitigations do I have already in place. For example, do I already make backups for a certain tool or the document that will be created, so that in case the tool is wrong, I can go back to step 1 again because I have frequent backups. So having all these mitigations upfront, evaluated in a risk assessment, will lead to a very little validation effort in the end. And again, usually it's black box. You're focusing on the user requirements. You don't go that deep into the unit testing or whatever unless you develop your own product. But if it's an available product, you might not even have to validate it at all. You just qualify it because you come to the conclusion that this is so robust and there's no risk that you just use it because there is nothing to validate from your point of view. So that's important, I think, to mention when we talk about this risk-based approach. And the validation frequency, I mean, it depends again on the tool, how often will it be updated. You have post-market surveillance. This will be part of it. You have to make sure that if the tools have an update, you have to check the update, and you have to at least evaluate it. It doesn't again mean you have to do a whole validation again. You have to evaluate it first, make a decision. Does this bug fix impact my product? Maybe you have a regression test anyway. Implemented, so you can just do a regression testing and see whether it works, and then you're fine. So don't do the whole stuff again. So really try to be pragmatic, because as Thomas said, you have to focus on your product. The product must be really good and not the tools, of course, but they are not that important like the product itself.
Yeah, you can spend probably every day, all day long, validating all the different software tools that a company is using. So please don't do that. Is the answer. But maybe just a quick fun question before we get into the AI world. Something I just wanted to throw it in here as the most shocking or surprising non-compliance that you guys have ever seen, or that you have maybe had, and you are, I mean, we don't want to know who, but it's just like something fun that, or well, fun, an unfortunate event, if you wish, that you have seen. Oliver?
I would
Who
skip.
Wants to start?
Yeah, I can start, but
Oliver?
I would skip that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you unmuted again?
Sorry. So there are too many. Is it related? I think for software, I wouldn't say non-conformity. I went to an audit, and the first thing they said that they can only show me the documentation from last month because they had a cybersecurity attack in the morning. So that's of course always an interesting start for an audit, and you know where to put your finger in the processes, what went wrong there. So that could be one example. But I think the funniest one was not software related, was rather in electrical device production area where you have to check pest control because there were cables for the electrical devices, and the auditor was asking from the notified body whether they have pest control implemented, and the company was surprised why he asked that, because they said because of mice, there are mouse, it can bite the cables and so on, and they said, no, that's not a problem. We have a marten, like the animal that eats that eats the plant of mice. We have him upstairs. He lives upstairs. So no mice here. So that was kind of okay. That was interesting for them to how to deal with it. And I was of course expecting, Thomas, that the notified body author will ask whether this marten animal is trained. Does he have the SOP learned for pest control? But yeah, what was interesting event.
A live mitigation. Matteo, you are muted too.
Well, because Thomas didn't say anything. So if you really want to lose your appetite, you go to the FDA website and look at the warning letters, the enforcement actions, and you go under the food stuff. Like you'll never eat out again. Like there's some stuff that is. I can remember one because I was watching, like I was just looking through it and see what happened. Is that there's somebody in the back in the warehouse of a certain place. I don't know if it was a restaurant, and it struck me because the auditor, they wrote down, they counted something like 326 exact number droppings of mice dropping. Like the exact number is not like 100, 326, something like that. That was so they stayed there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Well, they should have benefited from Oliver's example of that.
Yeah. Put a cat, like.
Yeah, a big cat. A few. All right, but let's then dive into the AI a little bit. So the AI Act that we all know, a very kind of broad horizontal regulation in the EU that all of us will have to comply with. And we, of course, want to know what does that as a requirement bring to, or set of requirements brings onto the plate of medical device manufacturers, but also for the auditors, like how are they expected to assess against AI Act? And maybe you can start from the top. Oliver, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the EU AI Act, maybe also the timeline, but the broad strokes of the requirements of medical device, or what does it bring onto the medical device software, especially developers? Yeah, and then maybe, yeah, how do you see it will add on to the EU MDR requirements as well?
So this time I saw it while I was on mute. Yeah, AI Act. I mean, first of all, I think the most important answer to give is there's only one conformity assessment plan. So you will not have 3 CE marks on your product. So it will be only one because the AI Act falls under the same new approach, legislative approach like MDR. Same as now, if you have a Bluetooth device, you will also have a CE mark, you know, for the other regulations. So that's why we have the same approach here. So I think how this will be done, Thomas might know more and can give us some insight how not everybody will handle this. And in terms of the requirements, I think the most important thing when we talk about AI is, and Thomas mentioned the TMNB already, there's a paper from the TMNB where they really describe in detail what kind of questions they would ask if you have AI in your product. And I think that's the starting point. If you take this guidance and put it in an Excel file or whatever, and then try to solve and to answer these questions and see whether you can meet them already or not, or whether you are having gaps here, that's the starting point. Because if you don't meet everything that's in there, you will not have a chance at all at the AI Act. So that's the starting point which you have to meet. There are, of course, deltas in the AI Act you have to look at. And I always say, you know, the deltas are very often not really deltas. Depending on the risk of an MDR product, you might come to the same mitigations, starting with the whole, let's say, data governance. To me, regardless of the AI Act, it makes sense that you control the data you use for training, that you have a version control for the data, that you know where it's coming from, that you have a source for it, that you label them appropriately, so that in case something gets wrong, you can trace back what was the problem, where do I get the data from. So this is something I'm not really sure whether, although it's not directly addressed in the MDR, but I think from a logical point of view, it makes sense to go this way. That would be one example. Another is like this human oversight, where you have as a delta. So again, you know, it should give you the chance as for example, as a doctor to intervene if you use into AI, that you have the chance to override it, and of course that you have to have the chance to understand how it works and what you can do to stop it if it doesn't work anymore. And again, I think this is binding now from the AI Act, but from a risk management point of view, there might be products already under MDR where you come to the same conclusion to say, okay, we have to do it like this because it's too risky, like a surgical robot or something. We have to have the stop button if it's AI and we don't want to have it to use it anymore because it doesn't work well. So this kind of, that's why I always say there's not really a delta. There's only just more emphasizing in the AI Act. And the third one is this transparency. Again, something I would see in the MDR again is like you want to explain if you make a diagnosis with AI. Now you can just say let's say you have a heart attack, and now the AI will ask you to have to explain to the user why you come to this conclusion with the AI. So what's the background of this decision? So, and this kind of transparency, again, I think it's mandatory in the AI Act, but from the MDR point of view, it depends on the product where it might make sense to give confidence levels, to give explanations, give heat maps, whatever, to make sure that the doctor can confirm what he's seeing there. So that's overall I can say at the moment. So I would say if you go for the TMNB and you meet everything that's there, you are already at a good start. And make sure that the data governance is done, the whole labeling for the data.
Yeah, and absolutely, very good points here. And I also added the questionnaire in the chat so that everybody can see it. And I would also recommend checking the FDA's guidance on AI-enabled medical devices, because it is a little bit broader, of course, but it has very good guidance in the training data, the data quality aspects of it, and cybersecurity, of course. But Thomas, briefly over to you. How will BSI now start the audits with AI Act and MDR together, and when?
When, exactly. So I think I would like to add to Oliver's comments, right? So we are talking about one matter which is regulated by two laws at the end of the day. The most specific one is going to take precedence. So if we are talking about a conformity assessment, then this is going to happen under the MDR umbrella. Yeah. So, and if you look into the AI Act Annex 1 lists as well the IVDR and MDR, right? The second aspect which comes into play is the AI as a safety component of a medical device, or it is an AI itself. The whole AI is the medical device at the end of the day. So plus, if you are required by to do a third-party conformity assessment, right? And now we need to switch to the MDR for a second. When are you required there? If we are talking about software, for example, right? Class 2A, 2B, Class 3, right? So if all of that applies, so you will be considered as a high risk under the AI Act, but the whole conformity assessment is going to happen under the MDR umbrella. We need to distinguish between two sets, really, which is at the moment, which is the transition phase, right? So the way it works at the moment is we call out state of the art, right? That's the technology AI at the end of the day. So you as a manufacturer, you would be required to develop, you know, and establish that state of the art if it comes to your AI device. And we are going to do an assessment on your technical documentation based on that state of the art as it is for any other technology, right? And again, that's just part of the conformity assessment under the MDR. It's a kind of an expert review. That's the transition period. So if the AI Act is fully in place, what is going to change then? There are more requirements there. It's not only the technical documentation. It is as well that we as a notified body, if we are not completely convinced about certain aspects, we can require the training data, we can require the model, we can perform tests on that model ourselves, and we can request as well the source code. So there's much more on the table if the AI Act is fully in place.
Okay, very interesting. Yeah, that's great. Great to know. There's one question I think that relates actually to this talk as well from Diana, who asks, could you please talk about AI sandbox testing and how it will improve the conformity assessment with a notified body?
Can you just, sorry, you were breaking up a second. It's about?
AI sandbox testing.
All right.
And how it will improve the conformity assessment with a notified body.
I mean, it gives you a lot of opportunities, right, to work as a manufacturer at the end of the day in a protected environment, right? So how this will speed up, or, you know, the conformity assessment process, I think at the end of the day, the same rules apply at the moment, right? It comes down to a technical documentation. You need to provide the right evidence to go through that conformity assessment. I mean, the impacts, I'm not going into the details about large language models and all of that at the moment, and the benefits of sandboxes, and because that's an endless topic in all fairness. On the first point, right, I mean, it has a lot of opportunities for the manufacturers, and it's you know, you can gather data in a more protected environment. Just think about validation, for example. It is something positive to do it that way, right? Isn't it?
For sure, yeah. So definitely a good thing to use the AI sandbox testing.
And
yeah.
Again, it's really like, again, this is risk-based approach. I mean, imagine there's a reason why big companies, when they release a new product or let's say a new update, bigger update, they release it in a smaller scale in a certain region and check whether it works or not, like a smoke test. And it's the same approach here. I think it's also in the interest of a manufacturer, maybe if it's really critical, to say, okay, let's reduce it to a certain range, maybe 1 or 2 hospitals first, and double check whether it works as intended. Although we should know because we have validated, but you know, it's always, reality is always different, and so therefore it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember another webinar where we talked about AI-enabled medical devices, and one expert said that before you put AI in your medical device, just first think if you really need it there. Yeah. You know, because it's like maybe you don't. Maybe you're just making yourself work too hard for nothing, and the users don't really care about that AI feature at all. So that was a very, very insightful comment as well. Like that really resonated with a lot of people. Actually, everybody had asked, do you have AI in your product? And then probably you would get more money from your investor if you do, but is it actually useful for your users is the first thing you should figure out. But let's go a little bit to not just AI, but also to kind of an area that I think Matteo mentioned earlier, cybersecurity. And we have been talking a lot recently about NIS2 as well, or NIS2, and other cybersecurity frameworks that, of course, should resonate to all medical device software SAMD developers. I wanted to ask Oliver, where should SAMD developers, or what areas should they look into in their product development or software lifecycle development, and to make sure that their product is secure and they are ready to go through an audit as well. So what should they do today? What framework should they look at? Where do you suggest them to start, Oliver?
Yeah, I think maybe because looking at the time, I think related to that, I think there's a very important question I also wanted to ask Thomas, because I think it's one that a lot of manufacturers are interested in for the cybersecurity topic. It's the penetration testing. And there are different discussions. So I think penetration testing makes absolutely sense. But the questions, and maybe Thomas can give a perspective from a notified body. Do you see the mandatory need that there's always been a penetration testing conducted before CE marking? If no, is it maybe a special requirement by a notified body that certain notified bodies would still insist, otherwise they will not proceed? And if you do penetration testing, would you see the need that it has to be done by another company, so like an external company? Or could you imagine that if you have a bigger company, that a department is splitted, working on different projects, and the other department that is not involved in the project is allowed to do the penetration testing of the other project, so that you have this kind of internal penetration testing? Would that be sufficient, or would you always ask for a external, let's say, independent penetration test?
Comes down to the requirements at the end of the day, right? I'm happy to play it back to you, because have you enough resources in-house with the adequate expertise, first of all, right? Can you guarantee that there's an independent testing, and so on, right? You need to start there. There's nothing wrong with an external third-party testing, because then per se you can tick a lot of boxes there, right? And on the other side, is it always required? I think it comes down a little bit as well to the intended use of your device and the risk and all of that behind it. But it is one test which can be performed. If you look into the standards, for example, right? And if we are talking about the health software, for example, right? Then we easily talk about penetration testing, right? At the end of the day, if you think about standard and all of that, you can, again, the good old principle still applies. It's a presumption maybe of conformity at the end of the day if you apply a standard. If you could convince your notified body with different test methods, you show the same safety level, that comes down again to state of the art. It might go, right? But it is challenging. I'm really blunt and honest with you, right? So I think it's, if you invest a lot of time into the state of the art, and if you do a good job there, it will easily tell you what kind of testing is required to end up at that level, right? And all of that starts again with the indication of use risk of your device and so on. And then we are talking about 62304, if this is applicable, and so on and so on. So there is no yes and no answer. And I know everybody's looking for that from a notified body, right? Close question, is it yes or is it no? But it really depends on the big picture there. Sorry, Oliver, I don't have an answer for you which satisfies you.
I think that was always already helpful. And I think, of course, external testing is always great. But then we come back to the beginning of the session. It's all about the money.
Everything is about the money. We are running. Talking about timelines, we are running out of time. So I just want to end up with one piece of advice from each of you that you would give to a medical device manufacturer that is an SAMD or medical device software developer with considering in having AI in it. What is your one piece of advice to such a developer?
I can start first if that's okay. Define your indications for use very well, straight at the beginning, and that's independent from AI, without AI. Sit down and don't be too bold and just claim what you can support with evidence.
Good. Start from the beginning.
Yeah, I have to sum up two things. One of you, one of what I said. The one that you said, I totally agree. Double check. Do we really need AI? Do we really need to put AI into an auto injector, into a pen? Is it the need for AI to calculate the dosage, or is it maybe easier? So exactly as I said, double check, do I need AI or not? Or is it just a marketing stuff? And if I need it, again, check the TMB position paper. And very likely, I am pretty sure there will be a guidance coming up from the European Commission to explain the interplay and give you a guidance on the open questions.
Wonderful. Thank you. Matteo. You're muted.
I was answering somebody's question.
I saw you were.
Other than start early, I like without even mentioning AI, just don't underestimate the effort of the regulatory burden. Don't underestimate it. Don't underestimate and a lot of companies are doing it already. Don't underestimate the potential effect of the need of clinical trials, for example. So entering the medical device world is very appealing because the revenues are typically good, but it is very demanding. The bar is high. And you need to be ready for that. If you're a small company, you're looking for investors. Now the investors know what they're looking for. They will ask these questions. They will ask, did you consider clinical trial? How long it's going to take to do that? And if you're not ready, and if you you have a kind of an idea of how long you're going to take that is not realistic, then they will realize that you're not ready. You're not serious. And as Thomas said, what is the indication for use? Because that drives drives everything. I've seen a lot of companies that I can do this, but also that, but maybe we can do something else. That's so then do everything. That's not the right way. Exactly. So that you need to really narrow it down as soon as you can, especially for the company that start from the technology side, like their research institute. They have a technology, they have an algorithm, they have something, and they are trying to find an application.
I think you answered the last question that we had, Brian's question. If they start from something else and then realize that it's a medical device that they want to do, what should they do then? So,
yeah, well, that's a different problem. Brian's question, sorry, for the other people, I don't know if everybody can see, is that what happens if you have a software and all of a sudden realize that you want it to become a medical device, or it should have been a medical device. It's going to be painful. You have to do all the technical documentation from scratch, and I guarantee you that you will find that you need to change it. There will be something like from the risk assessment that will highlight certain changes. There will be some labeling that you haven't considered. There will be changes. So it's going to be painful, longer, but without the fun of developing a new device.
I first want to thank our speakers. Thank you, Oliver. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Matteo. I think we can talk for hours on this, and hopefully we can do that a continuation at some point. But thank you so much for your insights. And of course, thank you, our lovely audience, for all the questions and participation in that. And we will be in touch with you with a follow-up, and have a lovely evening or the rest of the day. Thank you so much.